Hello and welcome to part 4 of the Airworthiness Management and Aircraft Records series. My name is Jack Tunnell and I'm your host for this series. In part 4 I'll show you some type certificate data sheets. I'll show you why they're important to airworthiness management for flight ops and maintenance ops. I'll show you how to find them and what you should look for. The experimental aircraft don't have type certificates, so there's nothing to conform to except the operating limitations that were originally approved or amended. I like hot rods, whether in the air or on the ground or on the water. This little airplane looks like a hot rod to me. It is a certificated aircraft, has a type certificate and a type certificate data sheet. Let's look at it. We'll go to the FAA Fast Team homepage. We'll scroll to the bottom and we'll look for type certificate data sheets. This is one of the easiest ways to find them. We'll go by current models, by make, type certificate holder. And this is built by Game Composites. So go to G here, come down to Game Composites, expand it, and we get to Game Bird. So this is the type certificate data sheet number. We'll pop it open the PDF. And there we go, a type certificate data sheet. We see who the holder is. We see what engine is approved to be on the airplane, what fuel is approved to be in the airplane, engine limits, propeller limits, airspeed limits, CG range. We get a lot of varying information. Carriage of baggage prohibited during aerobatic maneuvers, which is the primary use of this airplane. It's got 3 tanks, an aerobatic tank and 2 wing tanks, carries 81 gallons total, carries a lot of oil, a little bit of ballast, maximum operating altitude of 15,000 feet. Operations might need to know that. Control surface movements. If you were doing an inspection on this airplane, you might want to double check the control surface movements on this aircraft because this airplane is meant to be used at full control deflection. The manufacturer's serial numbers start with 0002 and on. It says to see note 5. It's got import requirements. Certification basis. It's approved for day VFR flight only. Flight into known icing is prohibited. Production basis says see note 5. No production basis at this time. Got some information on equipment. It has airplane flight manual document. As service information refers to service bulletins, structure repair manuals, vendor manuals, aircraft flight manuals, overhaul inspection manuals, and it says that if they contain a document that is approved by EASA, they're accepted by the FAA and considered FAA approved. Gives a list of the service documents. This is very important for maintenance ops. Maintenance manual number. And we get to an important part that you'll see a trend in as we look at type certificate data sheets. And that is in note 1. Current weight and balance report, including a list of equipment included in the certificated empty weight and loading instructions when necessary, must be provided for each aircraft at the time of original certification. And gives a little bit more note on that. Note 2, got to have the placards specified in the AFM. So you get instructions for continued airworthiness from a airplane maintenance manual document. And note 5 is kind of interesting. You don't see this very often. Since no production certificate's been issued, basically what it says is that each aircraft will be inspected by an FAA representative for conformity to their approved technical data. So that's a very basic little type certificate data sheet. Here's a beautiful little Cessna 140, 5300 Charlie. Let's look at its type certificate data sheet. All right, we'll go right back to the type certificate data sheet pages. We'll go back to current models. So we know this is a Cessna. So we go to C. We come down here to Cessna Aircraft Company. And we'll see that the Cessna 140 is not in this list. There are a whole bunch of F model Cessnas, but I believe all those are built in France. So if our beautiful little Cessna 140 type certificate data sheet is not listed here, where could it be? We go back to current models by make. So who owns Cessna now? Oh yeah, Textron. So we go over here and we look at Textron Aviation. Well, look here. We've got type certificate data sheets for the 120s, 140s, and another number for a 180, which is what this one is, 140A, I mean. So we'll go take a look at that. Look at its PDF, and here we have 5A2, the type certificate data sheet for a 140A. And it's got much of the same information. It's got operating limits, CG range. I'm going to scoot on down a little bit quicker. Some of the same information you saw on the Gamebird type certificate data sheet. Leveling information, certification basis, production basis, equipment. It's got a list of varying equipment that could be on the airplane. This is not the aircraft equipment list. The aircraft equipment list will have what was actually installed on the airplane, and it may refer back to these individual numbers of equipment. But this is a general equipment list that's approved under the type certificate. It is not the individual aircraft type certificate. So we get to note 1. Like a broken record, we go back to current weight and balance report, including a list of equipment included in certificated empty weight and loading instructions when necessary, must be in each aircraft at the time of original certification and at all times thereafter. You don't see that in many type certificate data sheets, but it is in some of the older airplanes. So if you're flying around in a Cessna 120, 140, 140A, and some other older airplanes, you need to look at your note 1, because you may be required to keep your accurate equipment list in the airplane while you're flying. Once again, it goes through various notes for other information on the airplane. Pretty simple type certificate data sheet. All right, we'll get out of that one. It's a small group of pilots in the U.S. who haven't flown a Cessna 172 at some time. This aircraft picture is from Barnstormers, so let's look at a little more info we can get from the FAA. Using the N number, we can do an N number lookup. Going to the FAA's homepage, they've got N number lookup right on the front. So here, we put the N number, which is 5228R. We'll let it have a look. Gives us a serial number of the airframe, gives us the manufacturer, the model, Gives us the registration status, when the expiration of the registration is here in 2020. It gives us the owner of the airplane. It gives us what information on the engine and the engine model number, but we don't get the engine serial number here. It gives us the airworthiness classification. It's a standard air classification in a normal category and utility category. So if you're just looking at an airplane, say even on barnstormers, or if you're looking at an airplane from a flight school that you want to have a quick look at to validate the registration certificate and make sure that the VIN number and the serial number match when you go to look at the airplane, it's a good place to look. Now let's take a look at the type certificate data sheet for this airplane. Once again, it's a Textron airplane, so we'll come down here and we'll look at 172s. And nearly every 172 made is type certificate 3A12. So it doesn't matter which one we click on. We'll bring up 3A12, look at the PDF. We already know this is a 172M, and so 172Ms are covered in this type certificate data sheet. And it has largely the same kind of information, but it's a much more detailed type certificate data sheet because it covers many of the models of 172. There's a 172A, C, D, E, F, G, and H. I and K. What we're looking for is an M. Hopefully you're not getting sick from looking at the screen passing so quickly. So here's the M. Here's the engine it's called for. It matched the one on the registration. So we probably can surmise that the engine is either the original equipment engine or a overhauled or repaired engine of the same model and make. Fuel limits, propellers that were legal to put on the airplane and their specifications. Airspeed limits, once again, information for your operations. And on some of these airplanes, they don't specify an aircraft flight manual. And all of these limits that come to you in the type certificate data sheet. Much of the same information, all your control surface movements, eligible serial numbers. We saw this airplane's serial number was 172 6344 something. So 172 6344, it's in this date range here. It is a 74 model. So we're going to come down here to notes, data pertinent to all models 172 through 172Q, certification basis, production basis, equipment. Note 1, broken record. Current weight and balance report, including a list of equipment, including the certificate, empty weight, and loading instructions when necessary, must be provided for each aircraft at the time of original certification. You're going to see that a lot. This one, 172M, doesn't require the the equipment list to be in the airplane for flight. So we know what the airframe is. This is the airframe type certificate data sheet. So let's get out of this one and let's look for the engine type certificate data sheet. So we go back to make, and it's a Lycoming. So let's see if it's under Lycoming. Lycoming engines, and they're listed alphabetically. So this is a 0320 E2D. So we're going to switch down here and we're going to take a look and see if we can find 0320s, and we're still in the IOs. So we get the more data and we keep coming down. And here's 0320s. It's not our model. It's not a E2D, but let's just have a look at it anyway. The type certificate data number is E274. So we'll click on it, go to the PDF. We'll see if we can find our make in the title. And so we're looking for an E2D, which is right here. So this covers our engine, and we get a bunch of engine information here. We get engine operating limits, various limitations, get a lot of various information that's good for operations and maintenance. If you have this airplane, you should find your airplane in this type certificate data sheet. You should find your engine type certificate data sheet. You should have a look at all of it. Okay, let's take a look at the prop. The prop's a Macaulay, and there were a bunch of different versions, and we don't know what prop is on the airplane because we're not looking at the airplane or its records at this point. So let's just guess at which prop it has. And it's a Macaulay. So we'll take a look at him, and Macaulay propeller systems. So this is a 1C160. So 1AB, 1C, 160, and this is a 1C160 CTM. So it should be here, P910. Have a look at this type certificate data sheet. And it starts to give us a bunch of information for the various things, mostly maintenance related in the propeller. Once again, if you're flying one of these airplanes, it's good to read through, find your airplane, and see if there's any information that you find relevant to your operation. And I'm also going to tease you to the airworthiness directive portion of all of this. So back to the wings homepage, and we'll go to airworthiness directives. So similar to the page for the type certificate data sheets, we can take a look at current ADs by make. And we know this airplane turns out to have a Textron type certificate data sheet, so we'll go to T, and we'll look for Textron. And this is a 172M, so we'll have a look at these. These are ADs that are confirmed against this 172M. So when you're looking at the AD listing, you should be able to look through here and you should find a reference point to every one of these. Even the ADs that came out before the production date of the airplane should be referenced in the AD listing, because some of these may have reverse effectivity. So anyway, if you just pick an AD, you click on it, get to the AD, you come down here, and some of these takes you right to the AD. This one was before next flight of the affected airplanes. Visually inspect wing flap actuator for a date code stamp. and you'll go through and find out exactly what's supposed to be inspected, what must happen in terms of method of compliance, how long you've got for method of compliance, the whole bit of information. So when you look at this AD and you look at the AD's sign off and the information in the AD listing, you should be able to understand exactly what's happened in terms of compliance with this AD, whether it was applicable to your airplane, your engine, your propeller, your appliances that are in the airplane, which means all the radios and all the various equipment. So that's a teaser to airworthiness directives. So here's a pretty little Grumman. Let's take a look at its type certificate data sheet. Back to the Wings homepage, and we go back to type certificate data sheets. And so, who owns the Grumman type certificate data sheet for these? Well, I didn't know, so I had to look it up on Google. And all I did was look up, excuse me, Grumman Tiger type certificate data sheet. And I looked through various pages, and I eventually found out it's True Flight Holdings. So we go to by make, we go to T, and we're looking for True Flight Holdings. And guess what? Here we have it. A16EA, pretty much the same thing. It's for the AA5, AA5A, 5B, AG5B. And you can see the evolution of the owner of the type certificate. You see information for each model, just like we found in the 172 type certificate data sheet. Found information on what's got to go on the airplane, its airspeed limits, CG ranges, a lot of information that applies both to flight ops and maintenance ops. So this airplane has some service life limits, information with respect to service life limit parts in this model are contained in the applicable manufacturer's service manual. So this has a life limited components manual, portion of the manual. And when it says life limited, this is not like an overhaul recommendation on your engine. Life limited components are limits. You fly beyond that, you're not in compliance. And here are some of them. Service life limited parts must be retired in accordance with the following schedule. Here's spar assemblies that go to 12,500 service life hours, and that's time in service. And a shoulder bolt that can go to 7,250. Now there may be supplemental type certificates for modifications that can go to these spars. Probably not the shoulder bolt, that's probably just a replacement part. But there may be type certificate data sheet, supplemental type certificates that have you do some alteration to these that extends the life limit. But 12,000 hours on a little GA airplane, that's a lot of hours. Gives you production basis. Basically information for each one of the types of airplanes. Data pertinent to all models, gives you leveling means, gives you certificate basis, gives you some equipment basis. Basic equipment prescribed in the applicable airworthiness regulations must be installed for certification. In addition to pilot operating handbook, airplane flight manual is required as follows. So these airplanes have an airplane flight manual. and the appropriate flight manual should be in the airplane for flight. Oh, wait a minute, note 1. A current weight and balance report including a list of equipment in the certificated empty weight and also loading instructions provided for each airplane at the time of original certification. This list of equipment is, as called in the industry, the equipment list. And the equipment list is the conformity report for your weight and balance. If the equipment list has not been properly updated through the years, through things that have happened to the airplane, then you can't consider the weight and balance to be accurate. Those two things go together in terms of if you're going to audit the airplane, if you're going to audit the weight and balance, you've got to start by auditing the equipment list. So anyway, there's a little teaser on the weight and balance and equipment list section where I'm going to show you how to do all that. Anyway, that's the type certificate data sheet for this little Grumman. So here's another old Grumman of, is that a mallard or a goose? I'm not sure. But we've got an N number, so let's take a look. So we're going to take a look at the N number. And number lookup is 41993. All right, it's a Grumman G44A, whatever that is. And we've got a serial number on it. So to find a Grumman G44A, how are we going to find out what type certificate data sheet applies to this airplane? Oh, by the way, the registration expiration is in 2021. Take a look at that too. And it has Lycoming geared 435s. So anyway, we've got a G44A. And the same thing occurs. I go to Google, I start looking up G44A, try to find a type certificate data sheet, find the holder. So back to type certificate data sheets, and what I wound up finding was that it's owned by Frakes Aviation. Who would have thought? G44A right here. And its type certificate data sheet is A734. So we'll have a look at it. G44A, yep, it's covered. And the type certificate holder, Frakes Aviation, here in Cleveland, Texas, right down the road from me. So similar information you find in all the other type certificate data sheets. The thing is to look at the type certificate data sheet that's applicable to your airplane. Every certified airplane has a type certificate data sheet. Every certified engine has a type certificate data sheet. Every certified propeller has a type certificate data sheet. I'm going to go down here and we're going to have a look at Note 1. Here we go. Once again, our broken record. Current weight and balance report, including a list of equipment, including certificated empty weight, loading instructions, must be in the aircraft at the time of the original certification at all times thereafter. So basically, you got one of these G44As, equipment list, accurate equipment list, got to be in the airplane, as well as your information for weight and balance. So here's an old beaver. Let's take a look at that. Same thing. When I look at beavers, you would have thought it would have been a de Havilland type certificate data sheet. It is not. Turns out Beaver is type certificate data sheet is owned by Viking Aircraft. Who would have thought it if you didn't work on Beavers all the time? So, is it Viking Aero Limited, Viking Flying Boat? Let's try one. Yep. The DHC, de Havilland -2, Mark 1, 2, and 3, all airworthiness or type secret data sheet A806. And goes right down through, same basic information that you find in every one of the type certificate data sheets. There are some variations in how they deal with equipment in the type certificate data sheets. Pipers are very good at giving you a list of possible equipment. Well, let's come down here and find note 1. There it is. Note 1, once again. Current weight and balance report, including a list of equipment, certificated empty weight, and loading instructions. Must be in aircraft at all times. Now, that means all times when flying. You can obviously take it out of the airplane to do updates and to validate the information, make copies, whatever you need to do. Flying must be in the aircraft at all times during flight. Anyway, so that's for the Beaver. What do I look at next? Oh, there's a nice old Blanca. Same thing with it. I'll look through the type certificate data sheets, try to find one. I find this one under Alexandria Aircraft. There it is. So we find 1A3, and it goes back to Blanca, Viking, Blanca to Viking. It gives you the trail of the type certificate record holder. Also, same thing, same kind of information. Once you look at one, you'll start to understand all of them. And they all have a note 1. Let's take a look. We'll find it down here somewhere. If this disturbs you, close your eyes for a second. Note 1, current weight and balance report, including a list of equipment included in certificated empty weight. A copy of the approved loading instructions should be posted inside the baggage compartment at all times. A little different text on that one. Okay, what about this bad boy? We know it's a Gulfstream demonstrator. So let's have a look at Gulfstream. Almost nobody else would put G650 on the tail and have a N650GA N number. I think they've got a lock on that. So back to by make, go over to G, Gulfstream, G6. And guess what? You get pretty much the same information that you get in all of the other type certificate data sheets, except this one's for a little more expensive airplane. That's not that some of the others aren't pretty expensive also. So we're going to zip on down here and find note 1 and see if it's the same as all the others. Close your eyes if you get vertigo from the screen moving too fast. Note 1, weight and balance. Look here. Current weight and balance report including a list of equipment included and certificated empty weight. You would think that there was like a form that they use when they create these type certificate data sheets, and note 1 is always weight and balance and equipment list. Gives you a little data on all that. Gives you data on flight manuals, gives you data on maintenance manuals, continued instructions for continued airworthiness. A lot of information in these type certificate data sheets, especially for later model transport category aircraft. Have a look at it if you've got one. Now these two airplanes are both experimentals. This little RV-8 is experimental in the amateur built category. This thing from who is it, Advanced Composites in Mojave. It's experimental in the research and development category and possibly exhibition. So neither one of these have type certificate data sheets. Each one of them have a set of operating limitations that are originally approved when the aircraft gets its special airworthiness certificate. Once again, any questions on this stuff, don't hesitate to send me a note. Your questions may wind up in a future presentation. Thanks for watching.